What is up, MCU fans, and welcome back to my channel. Now, this week is very important. The next several days is the build-up to Avengers Infinity War, maybe, possibly, potentially the biggest movie in history in terms of anticipation and box office, and we are going to take this entire week and do so many countdowns and rankings and whatever together, and I'm so excited. Now, to give you a little taste of that, today I wanted to do my very first ranking in this series of Avengers videos and start off with something slightly simplistic, but something I'm very excited to talk about, and that is Marvel Cinematic Universe fight scenes. Now, we are talking both traditional and non-traditional fight scenes, so it doesn't have to just be punchy. I'm talking protagonist versus antagonist, protagonist versus protagonist, antagonist versus AntMan. And this list is completely and utterly subjective. Everyone's going to have different lists because it's 18 different possibilities. And that's the main rule that I'm starting off with. I'm picking the best fight scene from each movie. There are 18 movies. Also, this isn't the ranking of the movie. This is the ranking of that specific fight scene. For example, I'm not a big fan of the Phantom Menace, but the Darth Maul fight scene would be high up on a Star Wars fight scene list. No car chases, no airplane explosions. I'm not even including space battles like ship on ship, pew pew pew. I'm gonna try to go as quick as I can. I've talked enough, guys. Let's get into this list. At the bottom spot on my list, and it's not because I'm not a big fan of the movie, it's just because this battle doesn't really have anything for me that is very memorable, and that is the Thor versus Malekith battle in Thor: The Dark World. Now, the idea behind it is fantastic. You've got hand-to-hand combat going from world to world. First off, I wasn't a big fan of Thor: The Dark World, and then you add in the anticipation from the trailers that you are going to get this epic fight scene that looks so cool, but then you actually get to it, and it's like, yeah, it's so yeah. Now, once again, this list is completely subjective. Some of you guys might have really loved this fight scene, but there was nothing in it that gave me an emotional impact, first off, because I didn't care about the villain. And then the choreography itself is a lot of falling and flailing and swinging, and that, to me, it just doesn't make for an entertaining fight scene, and just not a fight scene that I'm going to remember in 2 hours. Next up is a movie that I'm actually a bigger fan of than most, but this fight scene it didn't have the payoff that I wanted, and that is Captain America vs. the Red Skull in the first Avenger. Now, the entire movie leading up to me, the conflict and resolution, in a sense, between Captain America and Red Skull was great, and I actually really enjoy Red Skull as a villain, but if we are talking the actual combat scene, which is the scene that I chose from this movie, it's just not one that I can remember anything about. Maybe it's because Red Skull gets sucked up into space so fast and we didn't get much of a chance to see them go at it like we wanted to, like we saw throughout the whole movie that it was building up to. But I wasn't a huge fan of the combat, and honestly, just like the one in Thor: The Dark World, it's not that memorable. Number 16 is a movie that I love. I'm a huge fan of this film, but the Spider-Man versus Vulture battle at the end wasn't much of a battle. Like I told you guys, I'm picking one fight scene from every movie, and if I had to pick something from this movie, there's not much to choose from because it's more of a coming-of-age story, and that's no fault of the films, but we are ranking fight scenes, and there just wasn't one in here that really tickled my fancy. But I had to put one, so I chose the one at the end, but it wasn't much of a battle. It was more Spider-Man and Vulture on a plane, and the plane crashes, and then it's like, it was entertaining, and it was a fight scene, but there wasn't much fighting. I want to see Spider-Man doing some combat in his next movie, or in Infinity War when he fights Thanos. Yes! Look, I don't dislike the whole concept of Star-Lord versus Ego, and throughout the entire movie, you feel the connection, and then you see that disconnect at the end, and you're anticipating a fight scene that is fantastic, but if I am rating fight scenes, of course I have to consider the emotional aspect, but I don't consider what happens after the actual fight in this film part of that fight, so I have to disconnect the whole Yondu thing. Sure, the music kicks in at one point, you're feeling revved up, he attacks his dad, and then it's really just kind of flying at each other and tackling each other. There's no combat. There's no choreography, and that's something that I love to see in a fight scene. There just wasn't a lot to it. The reason it's so high up for me is because the emotion was there, and you felt it from Star-Lord and Ego, but in terms of actually fighting, that's why it's so low on this list. Next up is the end battle from Iron Man 3. I'm not a huge fan of Iron Man 3. I like it, and I do think this scene definitely has its moments. The reason that it's so low on this list is because up until this point, now I didn't see Iron Man's armor as indestructible, but this movie to me made it a little bit disposable. When you're jumping from suit to suit, sure, it looks great, and it made the action scene cool, but then I start to think about it, and it's like, hey, if you're building them that cheap, it didn't feel right to me. I feel like you need to focus on one suit, make it like indestructible, but instead you've got like 40,000 suits showing up. Once again, it looked cool. The actual battle was interesting, but you start to think about it, and it's like, why are they falling apart so easily? I mean, they're just exploding one after another, and I'm like, look, I'm looking too far into this. It was actually a cool battle. The main reason I have it that low is because Guy Pearce comes at the end, and he's not intimidating to me. He doesn't make for a good villain, and the whole Pepper thing just kind of threw it off. I don't know. I'm not the biggest fan of the third act of that movie, but visually it was great. Next up is Gamora versus Nebula from Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Here's the thing, I don't remember much from this fight because it was fairly short, but it is that emotional payoff from sister to sister that you were kind of anticipating, and the choreography itself was actually really good. Gamora can fight, Nebula can fight. It was visually interesting. And to me, yeah, I love the scene at the end when they're all grabbing the Infinity Stone, but that's not a fight scene. I had to go with the actual action/fight scene. The one that I chose from this film was Gamora versus Nebula. It's great. It's just not as memorable as some of the ones above them. Next up, I have Thor versus Loki from the first Thor, and the reason that this is so high up on my list, while there's not much to it, this is when they are fighting on the bridge at the end. There is so much emotion there. They are screaming at each other. They are spitting all over the place, and you can just feel the brother-to-brother love/hatred that they have built throughout the entire movie. Once again, Marvel does a great job at building that emotion and then getting that emotional payoff, not necessarily the choreography, because really they're just kind of swinging their big things, but it is visually pleasing, and I did think it was entertaining. You get that emotion, and you get some decent action between Thor and Loki. And I thought it was really interesting when he just laid the hammer down on top of him when they're on the bridge at the end. I thought that was cool. From Iron Man 2, a movie that's a little bit lower on this list, but when you think about Iron Man and War Machine versus the hammer drones at the end, and then of course Whiplash comes in for a few seconds, but really that first scene, when you first get to see War Machine, and the gun, and the tanks, and the lasers, just so many cool things coming at you at once, I was so entertained by this scene. Yeah, there's not much to it in terms of depth, but I remember the first time I watched this trailer and I saw War Machine's gun come out from his shoulder, and I'm like, that is absolutely awesome. I hope it pays off in the movie. And if we're talking specifically a fight scene, for me it paid off. Next up on my list is Ant-Man versus Yellowjacket. At the end, their fight scene when they are shrunk down on the small train, and even before that when they're rolling into the house, I loved everything about this fight scene. Some good choreography. You have Ant-Man shrinking and getting bigger. I thought that was entertaining. They're chucking stuff at each other. You see the train when it zooms out. That shot was in all of the trailers. I know you guys have seen it. Even if you haven't seen the movie, I just thought this fight scene was so creative, and that's the reason why it's so high on this list. The creativity behind it was genius, and when you have a concept like Ant-Man, the more hilarious, self-aware, and creative that you get with it, the more props you're going to get from me. Now we come to Doctor Strange. Now this is a prime example of, I said at the beginning, we're not doing just hand-to-hand combat. We're not doing just full-on fight scenes. This was a mental battle. And this is the scene at the end when he says, Dormammu, I have come to bargain. Yes, this is a fight scene to me because they are battling with their minds. It's like an X-Men Apocalypse when you see Professor Xavier fight Apocalypse in their mind. I thought it was so cool, so fun. You see him die over and over and over again, and eventually he wins because he just keeps utilizing the time stone. That was just so, oh my gosh, whoever came up with that, props to you. Next up, the movie is Iron Man 1. But Austin, which fight scene did you choose? Did you choose the one versus Ironmonger? I don't think that fight was terrible, but I chose the first time you see the Iron Man that we know and love fight the troops from overseas. I thought that was so cool. He goes there, he fights the soldiers, he claims that rightful mantle of Iron Man for the first time, and that shot of him walking away from the tank as it's exploding. It is iconic, but the scene itself, I actually went back and watched Iron Man Spider-Man the other day. It's so entertaining, and it's just so cool to see him for the first time. Next up is a movie that people might forget that exists in the MCU, and that is The Incredible Hulk. Yes, the movie is not crazy memorable, but the fight between him and Abomination, I mean, this is the matchup that we have been looking for so long against the Hulk, someone that has his size and strength, someone that can take him on. And that fight in the street, when Edward Norton, not Mark Ruffalo, comes down, slams, comes up as the Hulk, and you see them, I mean, he's taking cars, and he's using them as fists, and he's slapping the air. I mean, everything you love from the Hulk video games prior to that, you see in this fight scene. And if we are talking specifically that scene, it ranks very high on this list because it was so entertaining and a lot of people forget about it. Next up, the scene that I chose from Black Panther. There are a lot of very cool action scenes, and I'm talking fight scenes, so I didn't go with the car chase, even though there's some fighting in there. I chose the scene where Black Panther takes on Killmonger, when Killmonger has come to become king. Sure, he's not in the Black Panther suit, but if we're talking choreography, the way that the score comes in and builds the emotion, and then the payoff at the end for, spoiler alert, Killmonger becoming king when he throws Black Panther into the river. You just can't beat that kind of emotion. Sure, some people saw it coming. Throughout the movie, I'm like, all right, he's going to come in, and he's probably going to take over for at least a little bit, but the emotion was still there, the payoff was still there, and the choreography, which is what makes a fight scene, was really good. We have entered the top 5, and next up is a fight that is so monumental and fun and entertaining and just something I've wanted to see my whole life as a comic book fan, and that is the Hulkbuster versus the Hulk in Age of Ultron. This scene paid off, man. They teased it in the trailers. There are some good fights in Age of Ultron, but I think the Hulkbuster fight is just something that you can't beat that level of scale, emotion, the banter between Tony Stark and Hulk, even though Hulk's not responding back, obviously, but just the little quips that he's bringing out, the punches thrown, and then Iron Man making sure the building is clear and then destroying it. It's so creative the way that they did it, and I have always wanted to see the Hulkbuster on Hulk fight, and this one didn't disappoint, and that's fantastic. I feel like the more I watch this movie, the higher this goes on my list. A couple of months ago, this wouldn't have been at this spot, but the end fight in Thor, I have watched it. I keep going on, even when I'm not watching the movie, I'll go on YouTube and I'll type in Thor end scene fight, because just the way that the music mixes with the action is, to me, just so brilliant. What were you the god of again? And then he goes, he talks to Odin, he comes down with the lightning, and he is using the Thor powers we have been teased with for 10 years now. Without his hammer, and that's the coolest thing. He's throwing lightning bolts, he's throwing punches. You have the Hulk versus Fenrir. Valkyrie is just taking people out. You've even got some Heimdall and Loki thrown in. What an epic scene. If you look at how epic this thing is, really, there's not going to be a lot of fights that beat it unless, well, we'll get to it. Austin, what are you doing? This fight's too low. It's the fight at the end of the Avengers, the best theater experience I ever had, and mostly because of this third act. My good, how cool was it the first time? Just think back to the first time that you saw the Avengers. Regardless of how you feel about the movie, watching this fight scene, seeing the comic book come to life, and all of these different things happening on screen, whether it's Iron Man blasting off of Captain America's shield, or just Thor getting punched by the Hulk. Guys, this scene, it's too much. Yeah, it's number 3 on this list, but I have valid reasons. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so I'm a huge fan of choreography, and to this day, the best choreography I have ever seen in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie is Captain America: The Winter Soldier. Now, there are a lot of fight scenes in here that I could go with, whether it's the elevator fight, or even the fight at the beginning, where it's just Cap v bad guy, and they're just going at it. That was entertaining. But the emotion of his fight with the Winter Soldier on the freeway is something that I think can't be beaten, and not just the emotion, but like I said, I'm a huge fan of choreography, and that's something that the Russo brothers do brilliantly. The knife fight. well, the whole freeway fight, because it is one scene. We're saying fight scene, but when they get to the point where it's hand-to-hand combat, the way it's shot, the wide shots, then the close-ups, it's not crazy shaky cam, it's filmed beautifully, and just the way that it is filmed is perfect to me. I love that film, I love that actual battle, and then you have the added bonus of him seeing who the Winter Soldier actually is. It's just beautiful. A lot of people going to be mad at me for this, but we are doing one fight per movie, and I am doing 18 spots, and I have to pick a fight from Captain America Civil War. A lot of people are going to go with Iron Man versus Captain America because of the emotion, and the emotion is something I've been preaching. So am I a hypocrite for putting the airport scene at #1? Because I have been preaching how important it is to have emotion with a great choreographed battle, and they are so neck and neck for me. But honestly, guys, the thrill that I had watching that airport sequence, which is a long sequence, it's like 10 or 15 minutes long of just pure action, superhero versus superhero action. It's so beautiful. I mean, just the shot of them all lined up against each other, then running at each other, that constitutes it for top 5 on my list. But then when you actually get into the one-on-one fights, them chasing each other, seeing Spider-Man swinging and fighting Falcon and Bucky for the first time, I mean, everything about this fight scene, even if you don't like the movie, there is something that you can grasp onto in this scene because there's so much going on, but there's not so much going on to where it gets scattered because it's filmed so well and it's executed so perfectly, and that's why the airport scene is #1 on my list of best Marvel fight scenes. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, getting to the end. I know it's probably going to end up being a long video. I haven't edited yet, so I don't know. And like I said, this is such a subjective list. There is no way that you guys are going to agree with me on my top 5 because it's all really what I feel, but that's the beauty of the internet. I can tell you guys what I feel, but what I'm looking forward to is you telling me how you feel in the comments section below. Tell me, what is your favorite Marvel Cinematic Universe fight? What fights are you anticipating or looking forward to in Avengers Infinity War? My next list will probably either be my hero countdown or my villain countdown later on in the week. I might wait till after I see Infinity War, but I'm going to be re-ranking my Marvel Cinematic Universe movies because I've had some movies move up and down the list. Be on the lookout for a special movie review tomorrow. You guys are the absolute best. Thanks again for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I had a blast talking about this. I will catch you guys later.